you, and I'm not sure how much time do you have allotted for this?
We have you on through
Oh, I think you froze, but in any event, I'm going to go through a brief PowerPoint presentation. I'm sure people have lots of questions. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about 2020 and the year that was not the year that we expected, and then leave plenty of time for questions, if that's okay. Great. So somebody else is controlling this, so you can go to the next slide. You know, I often talk about creating a city where every neighborhood works. And if you go to the next slide, we get, what that means for me is that, we want to live in a city where every neighborhood is safe, where every neighborhood has access to quality, affordable housing, good jobs, and great amenities. And that's what I talk to our leadership team about and the departments across the city all the time. And 2020 presented some pretty unique challenges with respect to our goal of creating a city where every neighborhood works. And you can go to the next slide. Let's talk about safety. Next slide. A city where every neighborhood is safe, we often think about public safety, but in 2020, we had to literally think about the safety of our own lives and our own health. And while the county health department oversees health and public health services for Albany County, including the city of Albany, when we were hit with a pandemic in March of 2020, we couldn't sit back. We had to get to work. And so we focused on responding to that pandemic by making sure that people had access to food. If you can go to the next slide. People needed access to information about how they could keep themselves safe. And we worked hard to listen to the experts, to listen to the medical professionals and the scientists so that we could give the best information that we had available to us to members of our community. And one of the things that we learned very early on in COVID was that it was having a disparate impact on people of color, on communities that were already vulnerable. And so we did things like hold a forum on the health impacts of COVID-19, particularly for people, of color living in the city of Albany. Once it became clear that masks were a way that we could keep others safe as well as keep ourselves safe, we really leaned in on masking up. And masking ultimately is about personal responsibility, right? But we wanted to ensure that we were doing all that we could to communicate in a way that would be effective and that would help people to understand the importance of the simple act of wearing a mask. You could go to the next slide. We also wanted to respond to our business community. The health of our business community was really impacted. And so we immediately created a task force that quickly set up a website called Support Smallbany, and worked with our business community to, first of all, make sure that they had access to the federal aid that was being provided by the federal government in response to COVID, that they were able to navigate that and access those funds in an effective way. We also wanted to get out of the way. We wanted for government to get out of the way and be part of helping our businesses to be able to flex and respond. And so creating sidewalk spaces, expanding sidewalks, doing what we could to help support our small businesses. And we were also we didn't receive any direct funding from the federal government to run the city, but we did receive funding through HUD to respond. And so we used that funding to ensure that we were helping to support our small businesses. We created a grant program that also was double for minority and women-owned businesses, really responding to those who weren't able to access the federal PPE funds. Next slide. We also have been responding now that we are finally in a phase where there is a safe and effective vaccine that is available. And I know that this is a real challenge right now. I can only respond to what we are provided from at the state level. As you know, the vaccine is going from the federal level to the states, and then the states are distributing that. But again, this is about fighting for our residents. And over the weekend, County Executive Dan McCoy and I announced a partnership with Mohawk Ambulance to when we can get vaccine, we are ready to get it out into the community, particularly to people who don't have mobility, who may be housebound and not be able to get to an appointment. We have also partnered with all of our senior housing complexes in the city of Albany, from Avila all the way to South Mall Towers. And I'm fighting to ensure that those seniors are able to get vaccine on site in their own community rooms, so that they who have been so impacted without being able to have congregate meals or go out, see their grandchildren, that they have access to the vaccine. And we're going to fight to ensure that residents of the city of Albany have access to this vaccine. Right now, I realize that the rollout has been challenging, and we're trying to help our residents navigate it. Next slide. Safety, though, is also what we normally think about, right? Is our police department, police and fire. And 2020 was also a year where the structural racism and the ugliness of what has happened in communities across this country with respect to unfair policing were really laid in front of us. We all watched in horror as George Floyd was literally murdered in front of us on television. And that sparked a really important conversation, and it sparked a lot of pain and trauma in our community. And I'm really proud of how we've responded to that. More than 30 people across the city said yes when we asked them to be part of a policing reform collaborative, and hundreds of more across the city of Albany have responded to our request to be part of the change, to provide us with their input about how we can reimagine policing in the city of Albany. And it needs to be about reimagining policing. What we realize is that we have asked our police officers to do things that they were never expected to do, and we haven't necessarily provided them with the training or the tools to do it. And in many cases, a police officer isn't the ideal person to be responding, for example, to a dispute that might exist between a landlord and a tenant, or to a mom who's really dealing with an out of control teenager, and they just want help. And they want to know how they can help their child. And so that is what the Policing Reform Collaborative is undertaking. We're expecting a report from the collaborative within the next couple of weeks here. And that report is going to be a draft. We're going to put that out to the community, and the Common Council is going to lead a conversation around that draft so that they can then have a document that they approve by the governor's April 1st deadline. Next slide. And, we had real concerns about public safety. COVID-19 did not just impact our physical health. It impacted many systems that we rely on to keep our community safe. And one of the things that was highlighted in 2020 is that when you shut those systems down, it impacts our ability to keep our community safe. When you have to take your probation resources that the county has and turn those towards fighting a pandemic, which was the right decision. I want to be very clear. I'm not criticizing any of my fellow elected officials who had to make really difficult decisions in fighting this pandemic. But when you take those resources and you have to refocus them, there are consequences. When you close the courts down and you're not able to sentence people to prison, it has consequences. When you can't be in contact with one another, so you're not able to do the type of outreach that you do when somebody is coming back into the community from incarceration, it has consequences. And we saw that this year. But our police officers did an outstanding job of responding to what has plagued cities across this country, which was a significant uptick in gun violence. We've gotten dozens and dozens and dozens of guns off the street. We've made dozens and dozens and dozens of arrests. And we now realize that notwithstanding a pandemic, we have to ensure that we're working together in a really intentional way. And that is happening, and we're seeing the impact of that. We also had the horrific challenge with fireworks that plagued the city over the course of the summer. I literally had a resident drive to my house and wait out front to talk to me about how upset she was about how the fireworks were impacting her dog and her own sense of well-being. And so we worked with the county to get the rules changed, and we hope that that'll have a better impact in 2021. Next slide. We also, Mother Nature didn't care that it was a pandemic. And we had a storm that really impacted this community. It took down power lines, and actually some of our most vulnerable populations living in congregate housing were impacted. And so we fought really hard to get that prioritized by National Grid. We had a snowstorm of all snowstorms. In 2019, we had a 22-inch snowstorm, and we were getting kudos and shout outs, and everybody was so thrilled with how the city responded to that storm. That was 22 inches of snow over a 38-hour period. And we have an outstanding team at DGS that was able to knock that one out of the park. When we received 22 inches of snow in about 13 to 14 hours, it's a whole different story. And I know that people were frustrated. I know that it took us a long time to clean up, but that had to do, first of all, with Mother Nature and the way that the snow fell. It had to do with the fact that we have narrow streets, and you can't get big, wide snow plows down those streets. And there's only so much snow that a 1-ton pickup can push when it falls that fast. And we also have the challenge this year of we have a shortage of people with CDL licenses. So if you know anyone out there who's looking for a career, tell them to get their CDL license, and I could probably guarantee that we've got a spot for them. All right, next slide. Our streetlight conversion had to hit the pause button when we all paused, but that is now back underway and nearly complete. It's really our more decorative lights in our historic districts that take longer to convert because of issues around compatibility, but they've really made our streets brighter and safer. And we're also greatly reducing our carbon footprint. Next slide. We've made historic investments in streets and sidewalks. I know that people want us to do more, but I can assure you, we have spent more on repairing our streets and sidewalks than prior administrations. We have been able to find funding from other sources and other partners to make those investments. And we made, a huge improvement to the area around National Little League. And that's going to make that area so much safer. Next slide. We also have to focus on how we create quality, affordable housing in our neighborhoods. Next slide. In 2019, this is from 2019, sorry, that should say 2020. Well, 2020, we made about the same amount of investments. And we did receive a huge lead safe grant from HUD that we were surprised by, but it's a significant amount of dollars, millions of dollars, that is going to allow us to continue to make sure that all of our housing units are safe for our kids and our families. Next slide. But the big story was that at the end of 2019, we were awarded a $1 million grant aimed at combating blight. And that grant was tied to specific strategies that we've identified, because we know that you guys all get frustrated with lax code enforcement, what is perceived as lax code enforcement, and blight, and landlords and homeowners that don't take care of their properties. We've created strategies for addressing that. Obviously, the implementation was impacted by COVID, but those programs are locked. They're ready to go, and we're going to be moving forward with those in 2021. Next slide. Notwithstanding the challenges that we faced, we have reduced the number of those red X buildings. We're not at the goal that I set yet, but we are making headway, and we're moving the needle on the number of those buildings that have red X's. We're also working with our residents to ensure that they understand what their rights are and what their obligations are as tenants in the city of Albany. Next slide. Next slide. Let's talk a little bit about amenities. Again, even though we faced a pandemic, we continued to make investments in our parks, and we had a fun Play Streets program throughout the summer that was socially distanced and safe, but that allowed our kids to get outside. We continued to sponsor things like yoga in the park, and doing everything that we could to keep people safe, but also get them involved and get them active. Next slide. We weren't sure what the summer was going to look like. We have significant funding challenges, but we were able to open the Capitol Hills Golf Course this summer. We were able to open our pools and our spray pads because we knew that it was important for people dealing with the pandemic to have a way to get out and to recreate and to do fun, safe things with their families. And I will tell you, we were one of the only municipalities in the region, and really as you looked across the country, that made the commitment to, because of our commitment to equity, to open these amenities and to find a way to pay for it. And I'm really proud of the way that our city workforce came together with a can-do attitude and our ability to be creative about accessing funding sources to make this happen. Next slide. We also continue with our park revitalizations. It's a little cold now, but if you haven't been down to Tivoli Preserve, what you're looking at used to be a huge, massive storm sewer pipe that was removed and replaced. We reopened the stream in the Tivoli Preserve. It's beautiful. It's an incredible project, and it's an amazing asset to have in the city of Albany. And we also were finally able to tackle the final challenges at the park there at National Little League to be able to make that fully accessible and to clear away some brush that had grown up there and overgrown there. So that park is looking tremendous. Next slide. The Albany Skyway is delayed, but won't be deterred. We are in the process of finalizing the awarding of the contract to start that project that will provide yet another link from our downtown directly to our waterfront, something that has been important in all neighborhoods in our city. This is a request that wasn't just from folks living in Arbor Hill. This was a request that came through in our 2030 plan from people all over the city. Next slide. So I want to thank you. I know that people have a lot of questions, and I want to be able to get to those questions.
Thank you, Mayor Shima. Really appreciate it, and thank you for everything you do for the city. Really appreciate it. Before we get to questions, I just have a couple other announcements that I forgot to mention, so I just wanted to say them real quick. I know we just really want to say thank you to your CBD store on New Scotland Avenue. They really stepped up. They are one of our community partners, and they made a significant investment with neighborhood associations. We want to say thank you to the your CBD store. And I know Connie's with us down there as well. I also just wanted to mention everybody that this is being recorded, and it will be available for other people to view afterwards as well. And lastly, I just want to also give a shout out to Howie Stroller for his tenure with the Neighborhood Association, the Council of Albany Neighborhood Associations. So if you have a question for the mayor, if you can go ahead and just raise your hand, we'd really appreciate it. Leo, if you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good evening, Mayor. I'm wondering if you could address the current plans, the long-range plans for garbage collection and waste management in the city. I didn't see that as part of your presentation. And of course, it's not a personal problem for me anymore, but I still consider you my mayor.
Thank you, Leo, and it's good to see you too, Martha. We have a group that was meeting regularly pre-COVID. I know that Judy and Kathy were both very involved in it. Right now we have extended the life of the landfill to 2026, and we paid off the landfill this year. Actually, we're in 2021 now. We paid off the landfill last year in 2020. And, there have been a number of changes that unanticipated that have occurred over the last 2 years. One of those is the, really the collapse of the recycling market and recyclables, which is causing a number of different challenges. In a perfect world, we would adopt a policy of pay as you throw, where you pay for the amount of garbage that you dispose of. And so you reward people who throw out less trash, and the more trash you throw out, the more you pay. As Judy and Kathy probably could attest to, in a city as diverse as Albany, particularly with the number of neighborhoods that we have with high levels of poverty and challenges, it does become in many cases a social justice issue. So the way that pay as you throw works is that the individual pays for the disposal of their garbage. And so in looking in our lower income communities, you're talking about charging people $3 or $5 per bag of garbage that they're putting on the curb. And so we want to take a very mindful approach to that. We will be looking at how we move forward with that. But from a fiscal standpoint, the fact that we were able to pay off the landfill to reduce that debt burden from the city's books, we've also greatly reduced our reliance on landfill revenue. So the revenue that we get from the landfill now, really, it's just slightly more than the cost of the city operating the landfill, which is a good thing, right? Because that means that when we stop having a landfill and we close down that operation, we're not having that huge impact back when the city used to book $15 million a year in landfill revenue. So, I think from a fiscal standpoint, we will be able to continue on the path that we're on and continue to provide garbage disposal for our residents in the city of Albany.
Thank you, Leo, for that question. A couple of questions came to the chat room. One of them was asking what the status of the new Scotland Avenue development project at the post office. And another one was regarding if there's any green infrastructure projects in the works to address specifically more of the chronic flooding that happens in this neighborhood.
Okay. So with respect to the new Scotland Avenue project, it's my understanding that the developer does intend to move forward with that project. Notwithstanding the impacts of COVID, it delayed a lot, but my understanding is that they intend to move forward with construction this spring on that project. And then with respect to infrastructure projects to address flooding, I know that we have been looking at the Melrose neighborhood and some issues that they have there. I'm not familiar with anything specific in addition to what we've already done in the Helderberg neighborhood, but if there are specific projects that you want us to look at with respect to flooding, we will do that. I know we continue to look at Hackett and the challenges that we have on Hackett, but I would have to double check with the water department. I do believe they have some planning that they're doing for down there, but I just can't tell you off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
And another question that came into the Zoom was asking about safety risks around the Capitol. I don't know if you're able to address that.
Yeah, I mean, we're monitoring that really closely, and we have, we work with both at the federal and the state level with respect to the, Joint Terrorism Task Force, as well as the other intelligence resources that we have through the New York State crime analysis. And we are fully prepared for Sunday as well as for Wednesday. And as we, to the extent that we have specific concerns, we're going to be communicating that. I anticipate that the police chief and I will be making a statement tomorrow to our residents. And we're collecting just a little bit more information before we do that. But at this point, we are preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. But we are not aware of any specific threats to the city of Albany. That said, we are prepared for protesters to be coming, and we are prepared to respond to that and to be able to keep people safe.
I think Jean, you had a question. If you can go ahead and unmute yourself. You're still on mute, Jean.
Jean, I can't hear you.
On the bottom left-hand portion of your screen, there should be a mute button. You can hit that, and it should unmute you.
Does it say, I mean, I'm Jean, but I didn't raise my hand. Maybe there's another one?
No, it's different, Jean.
Okay. I'll mute myself.
Jean, can you touch the black part of your screen and you'll see some little buttons will come up, and one of them has like a picture of a microphone with a line through it. You should try to touch that one and it'll turn green.
Sam or Hillary, can you unmute her?
That's a him.
I'm working on it. It's not letting me. It just says ask to unmute. Oh.
Jean, are you able to submit your question through the chat box?
I'll ask a question in the meantime. I know, Mayor, you had mentioned that you didn't meet the goal on the red X's. What was your goal? What would you like to see happen with that?
We were looking at trying to have a 30% reduction. But it's I like to put big goals out there and have people go after them. I think we have a combination of really looking at the buildings with the red X's, and then also looking at our vacant building registry. And our goal for the vacant building registry was to actually increase it, because we knew we had a number of properties that were in violation of city code and they were not registering. So they were vacant, but they weren't registered. We were able to meet the goal with respect to that, of getting more property owners registered. And then that gives us the ability to have some hooks in those property owners, because they're required to submit a plan. They're required to provide us with contact information. And now, because of changes that were approved by your council members and the rest of the council, we have the ability to actually go inside those buildings and request an interior inspection of those buildings. So, it is a very challenging state to do this work. New York State has very strong property rights laws on the books. And we're fortunate that John McDonald, who's one of the assembly members he doesn't represent the Helderberg neighborhood, but he represents a number of neighborhoods in the city of Albany, is a former mayor of Cohoes and had to deal with a lot of these issues. And so he's been very helpful in proposing legislation that makes it easier for us to be able to go after these buildings.
Thank you. Looks like, Jean, you were able to unmute yourself. So if you want to go ahead and ask your question. Jean?
Gene, we can hear you now. Oh. It says you're unmuted, but I don't hear you. No, sorry.
Yeah, it appears he's still having some issues. Another question came in the meantime regarding the red light cameras. Somebody's asking how they're doing. Are there any plans to expand the usage?
One of the things that first of all, the red light cameras continue to, not cost the city anything. We do generate a little bit of revenue from the red light cameras. One of the things that we have been looking at with other cities in the state, there's an interest in having speeding cameras in school zones. So one of the legislative initiatives that we asked for last year and didn't get, but obviously COVID, really shortened the legislative session. But we are looking to get the authority. That doesn't mean that we would do it, that we'd go to the council to get permission to do it, but that we would have the authority to, those cameras are able to measure speed, to then use them to ensure that we're enforcing speeding in our school zones.
Another question that came in regarding, which we already talked about, was the New Scotland Avenue development project at the post office site. But is there any indication that there will remain a post office?
I'm not aware of any anything other than that the post office is planning to stay there. But as we know, with the post office, there have been a number of pretty significant changes and challenges that they're facing. I don't want to be political with the neighborhood association, but I do think that with a new administration, some of those cuts probably will not move forward, which would bode well for being able to keep the post office there.
Any other questions? Kathy?
Yeah, hi, Mayor. I just wanted to make a comment. I thought it was a great idea to have the Mohawk ambulance go and be able to distribute vaccines to people in their homes. And I am already hearing from some of my constituents about it. And I know that I did call Mohawk ambulance. They do not have the vaccines as of yet, but they are taking names. So I wanted to let people know, if they know anyone who's interested, you could contact their administrative offices and they're taking names.
So Kathy, I want to build on that because, it's really important that we're able to get vaccine to providers like Mohawk and others who are working with us to address very specific issues of people who don't have the mobility to go and get the vaccine. And then also to address the NORC. Many people in the Helderberg Neighborhood Association are also part of the NORC, which for those of you who don't know is the naturally occurring retirement community. And they are partnering with us. We had a great call a couple of days ago with all of the senior housing developments and the NORC that are located in the city of Albany and are looking at doing standing up a site for all of those NORC members, whether it be at the JCC or potentially St. Sophia's, but to have a place where we can over a 1-day period or 2-day period get a large part of that neighborhood and the community vaccinated.
Great. Judy, did you have your hand up before? No?
That
It
might
looks
be
like
from when I had a question for Gordy.
Got it.
Officer McLean.
I see that Zachary, you have a question.
Thank you very much. And hi, Mayor Sheehan. Zach Simpson with Cana and Upper Washington Ave. One of the citywide focuses during COVID was the U.S. Census. Do we have an idea of how Albany did and any fiscal impacts yet?
We don't. The Department of Commerce did not turn in the numbers by the deadline, and we don't. But I want everybody to brace themselves. I am quite certain that we are going to have a pretty significant undercount. You know, the resources were not made available that were supposed to be made available at the federal level. I want to give a shout out to people on the Complete Count Committee and everything that the employees. I mean, we had rec aides who, because our community centers had to be closed, went out and did census work. We had a lot of outreach that occurred in communities across the city, but it is not enough to match the need for those census takers working for the Census Bureau. And they pulled resource out of the city of Albany and then contacted me and said, how can we help? Because Albany has such a huge undercount. So it was very, very, very challenging. And we have a very significant undercount, unfortunately. You know, it may be that the Biden administration comes up with a formula to address the undercount because it's not unique to the city of Albany. But, I think that there definitely are concerns.
Any other questions for the mayor? I think I just saw somebody else with their hand. Yep.
Yes, Mayor, it's Bill Hogan. Perhaps I missed this because I didn't get on at the start, but what's the status of the Roundabout Project on New Scotland and Manning?
New Scotland and Manning.
Hospital. Yeah.
Yeah. There's not a Roundabout Project for New Scotland and Manning. There were a number of options that were presented by Creighton Manning around the traffic issues, and I believe that ultimately the roundabout was not near the top of the list of the various options that could be implemented. I know that they are looking at lane extensions, so there are some recommendations with respect to how traffic gets sort of funneled through that area. And all of that was put on hold, unfortunately, because of COVID, but we are in line. That project is in the queue to request funding through the Capital District Transportation Committee. I don't know when that will get addressed. It could be 2021, which would mean 2022 for the restriping.
All right, well, that's good to hear. I mean, not to delay, but I'm glad the roundabout is not going to be part of the project. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Also, I just want to mention that we did put the neighborhood survey link in the chat box. So if you want to go ahead and take the survey so we can just get some input from the neighborhood, from the neighbors, that would be appreciated. If anybody else has a question, okay, Ann and Barry, go ahead. You can unmute yourself.
Yes, I put a question in the chat box. I'm curious about all the tax exempt property in the city and whether there's been any talk about properties such as those around Albany Med, which contain a lot of commercial establishments, like Panera Bread, for example. And my understanding is that their tax rates are lower than other commercial properties because the properties are owned by Albany Med. And I don't know if that's actually true, and if it is there any thought about ways of getting some kind of payments from these properties that aren't hospitals themselves, for example?
Yes, that's a great question. And, first of all, for any commercial activity that occurs within a tax exempt property, that is assessed by our assessor the same way that he would assess a Panera, in any other location. And that tax is then levied on that property. So they are required to pay property taxes for that commercial property. With respect to the building that you're talking about, I think the confusion is that when that building was built, it was granted a pilot. So it had a payment that it was making in lieu of taxes. That pilot is, if it hasn't expired, it's got to be, expiring within a year, and then it would go onto the tax rolls. So some of those buildings were built by private developers and are leased to the hospital. They are taxed. So, it really, I'd have to sit down and look property by property, but I think you're talking about in general. We are doing all that we can to ensure that we are taxing every single thing that is taxable. There was an executive order, and I believe there was a legislation passed by the state legislature. Typically every year, not-for-profits have to certify that they are a not-for-profit in order to keep their not-for-profit status. And they have to make that certification every year. Because of COVID, that was waived. So, but because of that requirement, which apparently our prior assessor under the prior administration never really enforced that, our current assessor enforces that. And he's been successful in getting a number of properties back on the tax rolls that really should not have been getting tax exempt status.
Excellent. Thank you again. I think that's about the amount of time we have for the mayor.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say we really appreciate you with joining us tonight, and thank you for all the work that you did on New Scotland Avenue and at the business corridor. It looks great, and I'm sure all the businesses really appreciate it. So thank you for all the work that you've done for the neighborhood.
Thank you, and please stay tuned because we want to make sure that you stay safe. There are, I understand people's anxieties about what might be happening down at the Capitol over the next few days. We will definitely keep you informed. We blast our emails out to the neighborhood association. So please stay tuned and stay safe. And if you're not on Nixle, please get on Nixle because that's a great way to get alerts in real time. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, moving on. We have a presentation from Bob Baker with the Regional Food Bank of Northeastern New York, and just going to do a brief presentation about a pilot program that they'd like to implement. Bob?
Oh, Bob, you're muted. Bob, you're still muted.
No, now I'm
We're
not.
good. Now we're good.
Okay, we're good?
We're good.
Okay, good. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Of course, thank you for having me here tonight. I'm Bob Baker. I'm with the Regional Food Bank, and I have the privilege and honor and fun to manage our farm. And that's what I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about. I think you're all pretty aware of the Regional Food Bank. This year was an amazing year for us, 2020, I'm talking about. And we put out over 54 million pounds of food to 24 counties, which geographically covers about 40% of our state. So what that really amounted to was about 1 million pounds of food more per month than we had last year. So it's been a very busy year for us. And one thing I like to point out is our organization is certainly a community organization. It's neighbors helping neighbors, just like you have your neighborhood association to help each other. Actually, 30% of our workforce out in Latham are volunteers, and that even grows more at our farm. It becomes around 50%. And the delivery of all the food to the individuals or families is put out mostly through food pantries. And as you well know, that's all volunteers. So I just want to shout out to all of our volunteers. Many of you are listening tonight, maybe volunteers or have helped us at some point in time. So I really want to thank you for that. So why I'm here tonight is we have our own farm, and the farm is a resource for the food bank. We actually produce about 50 tons of vegetables per year that come in to feed the hungry. And the way that we help to pay for the farm is through our community supported agricultural program. And what that actually means is we sell shares of vegetables into the community. And as we sell those shares, the people that join or become members obviously become our partners in actually making sure that we have the money to grow the food, to bring into the food bank, to feed the hungry. And so this year, we're going to run a pilot program. Previously, we delivered to sites, and some of our sites where we delivered these shares to and people picked up were like Albany Med, GE, were some of our bigger sites. All of St. Peter's hospitals were also sites. Many state organizations, like where Hillary works at the office of 110 State Street, Office of State Controller. So we've had many sites, 25 sites, where we delivered the shares and people would pick them up at the sites. Well, this year, we're going to do a pilot project with home delivery. And so that's why I'm here tonight, to let you know a little bit about it. The shares would actually be delivered on a weekly basis to your home. They would come in a secure, cold packed, insulated box that's good for about 6 to 8 hours. And they would be delivered again on a weekly basis. And we would feature such items as lettuce, beets, basil, scallions, green beans, broccoli, carrots, zucchini, all the things that you would expect to receive. And the nice thing is that you have the opportunity to choose. Each week, we would let you know what vegetables would be available that week, and then you get to make a selection of what you would actually want in your share. Also, we offer a fruit share through Altamont Orchards, and that includes everything from strawberries, blueberries, grapes, plums, nectarines, peaches for the season. And what else did I? Oh yeah, so I just want to give you an idea of what you might find in a share each week. So that might be like a head of lettuce, a bunch of scallions, a couple zucchini, a bunch of beets, maybe some cucumbers, corn, maybe some tomatoes and some peppers. So all of that would be in your share, and that would equal maybe about 12 to 14 pounds of vegetables. The season runs from late June to early October. So that's about 16 weeks of vegetables. And what I'd like to do, with your permission, at some point in maybe February, would be to send out a flyer and survey through your association. And that way people could ask questions and show their interest maybe in receiving something like that on an individual basis. So Hillary has a few slides for us to see. We can show you a quick view of the farm, and then I can take any questions. And I know Hillary's got a few comments too to make too. So anyway, the farm is out in Voorheesville. It's right near Thatcher Park. So we're up in the Helderbergs. And this is just a picture of our greenhouse. We have our own greenhouse, and you can see there's a bunch of transplants in there growing. And most of our seeds are from Maine. They have a very similar environment, and we're organic. Just again, a picture of a tractor, and we make the beds for our planting. It just helps drainage and also helps warmth, keeps the soil warm in the springtime. Again, this is one of our barns. It's just showing you a view of our packing area where we pack our shares on the weekly basis. Again, many volunteers help us. Here's just some of the typical vegetables that I mentioned to you earlier that you'd find in your shares. And there's one example of a fruit share. And what do we got here? Oh, that's one of our winter shares. So this year we ran a pilot program with winter shares for November, December, and January. It went very well. We had about 67 people that participated this year in our winter shares. And again, this is just showing a food pantry where the vegetables that we would grow would go out through a food pantry and to the individuals or families who would be in need. Okay, so thank you for your time, and Hillary has a few comments to make, and if you do have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bob. So I'm just going to speak quickly. So again, Hillary Papano, I know many of you, I'm now the chair of the association, but putting on a different hat for a few minutes, I've been a member of the CSA for the past 5 years. I'm also a site coordinator at my office. So like Bob said, traditionally every Thursday between July and October, I'd get a big, beautiful delivery box of the gorgeous vegetables. But the home delivery pilot is definitely very exciting as an option. But I just wanted to share why I'm a member. There are many CSA programs throughout the Capital District. We live in an agricultural rich area, but as I don't know how many other nonprofit CSAs there are. Regardless, the mission is really what I know for myself is why I belong to this CSA program. And I can say the same for many of the other members who I've gotten to know. Again, 2/3 of the farm produce goes to the food bank. So folks who are using the food bank services are not just getting your typical canned goods, but they're getting fresh, organic, local produce. And 40% of the food bank feeds children. So that's very meaningful. And also I like supporting local farms. I like knowing where my food comes from. I volunteer on the farm. It's a great farm to go and visit. I like knowing where it's growing. It's also very economical in addition to being local and organic and very tasty. And there's some nice add-ons too with fruit and honey and maple syrup. So there's a lot of variety that's offered. And as Bob mentioned too, there's a new flexibility to the program where I love beets, but I know some people don't. And you can choose your preferences. You can swap things out and customize your share each week. So that flexibility, that's more of a, I know other programs offer that, and now this one does too. And you can just do it easily online. So that's really great. And just one quick highlight that I think makes this program really special is what's called Pick Your Own. So on select Saturdays throughout the harvest season, the farm will open it up to members, their friends and families. You go, you pick the extra produce, typically stuff that's a little too labor intensive for your weekly share, like baby tomatoes and fresh herbs, and they grow beautiful fresh cut flowers. And it's just fun. It's just honestly a nice community of people. And that's the other reason that I personally have joined. So I know Bob will be sharing more information on the home delivery, but again, I've been a member for 5 years. If anyone has any questions, I'll make sure you have my information. Be more than happy to talk to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Hillary. Anybody have any questions for Bob? Bob, what's typically the cost for the share of this?
Okay, so yeah, so the cost is the share would be approximately $39 for the individual share, which would maybe feed 1 or 2 people. And then for a family of 4 to 5, it would be $59. And again, the smaller share would have about 12 to 14 pounds, and the larger share would have anywhere from 16 to 20 pounds of vegetables on a weekly basis.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. And you can pay you don't have to put money down. You can pay on a weekly basis. So you can pay on a weekly basis. We can put your credit card on file, and then just each week as you pick your vegetables, we would charge you for it. If you want to skip a week, you can. If you want to skip 2 weeks, you can. So we're very flexible on how we run the program.
Thanks, Bob.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to move on, unless anybody has any other questions for Bob. I just do want to give a quick shout out. Sam Curry, who has been our chair, is our outgoing chair, and she's not going to be with us for the next year. So I just wanted to say thank you to Sam for the work that you've done for the board for the past few years. It's been a pleasure working with you. So we really appreciate everything you've done for the board.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. I love this neighborhood. I continue to love this neighborhood, and I'm super proud of the work that we've done, and excited to see what you guys do in the future.
Thanks, Sam. We've got 2 new board members. I know, we voted everybody in earlier today, but Julie and Eric are with us as well. They're probably faces that most of you haven't seen before. So 2 of our new board members. So we just want to say welcome to them, and we look forward to working with you guys. All right. Does anybody have anything else they want to share before we close up? Is there anything that anybody wants?
I'd like to mention is just on behalf of all the local shops, restaurants, and businesses, that they really appreciate everyone's support during this difficult time. And I talked to a lot of the owners, and they are appreciative, and they'd really like all of our continued support and to spread the word. Some of them opened very recently before COVID started, and so that is a tough road to hoe. And so getting takeout and doing whatever you can to support them is greatly appreciated. And I know we have one new business that's supposed to be coming online here pretty soon, according to the Times Union. Mr. Bumbles is supposed to be opening up where the old Domino's was at the corner of Grove and New Scotland. And just reading briefly, it's going to have breakfast, lunch, early dinner, mostly lighter fare, and with an awareness of a variety of dietary restrictions and preferences. He also plans to offer a meal prep service for individual purchases or by subscription, allowances for diets, including keto, vegan, and gluten-averse, low carb, and more. So we'll look for that to be coming online relatively soon, I think, just based on what I see when I drive past it.
Thanks, Dave. Well, if anybody has anything else, I think that's all. That concludes our meeting. Thanks for joining us tonight again. If you haven't joined HNA or sent your 2021 membership dues in, we'd really appreciate you doing that. Again, you can go ahead and send a check-in by mail to P.O. Box 8841, Albany, New York, 12208. You can make a check out to HNA. You can also go ahead and pay online using our PayPal account, hnaalbany.com. There's a PayPal link membership on there as well. So we thank everybody for joining us, and we hope to talk to you again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.